I was organizing inventory in the stockroom of my boutique fitness studio when I heard my husband's voice drifting through the thin walls from his home office next door. What I heard next would have crushed most wives into helpless despair. But while Marcus was probably congratulating himself on his masterful secret planning, I was already calculating how to protect everything I'd worked 15 years to build. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. So you're confident we can have the papers filed by Friday? Marcus's voice carried clearly through the shared wall of our converted warehouse space in downtown Riverside Heights. My blood turned to ice as I recognized the formal, businesslike tone he used when discussing serious matters, the same voice he'd used when negotiating the lease for this very building 3 years ago. My name is Dr. Sophia Reeves, and at 38, I had just discovered that my husband of 12 years was secretly orchestrating our divorce with the most ruthless family law firm in the tri-state area. But what Marcus didn't realize was that the woman who had transformed an abandoned warehouse into the most successful wellness center in Riverside Heights had been watching, listening, and preparing for exactly this moment longer than he could possibly imagine. I pressed myself closer to the wall, my heart pounding as another voice responded. Clearly the lawyer, since it carried the practiced authority of someone accustomed to destroying lives for billable hours. Friday works perfectly, Mr. Reeves. The timing gives us maximum strategic advantage while she's focused on that big corporate wellness contract she's been chasing. That big corporate wellness contract. He meant the 3-year deal with Meridian, Industries that would bring in over $2 million and establish my studio as the premier corporate wellness provider in the region. The contract I'd been working 18-hour days to secure, believing my husband was supporting my dreams, while he was actually timing his betrayal around my biggest professional opportunity. Perfect, Marcus replied with satisfaction that made my stomach turn. Sophia will be completely blindsided. She's so wrapped up in her little yoga business, she has no idea what's coming. Little yoga business. The casual dismissal hit harder than I expected. My little yoga business was actually Serenity Wellness Center, a 15,000 square foot facility that employed 23 people and had generated more revenue than Marcus's consulting firm for the past 4 years running. But Marcus had always minimized my success, treating my PhD in sports psychology and my certification in multiple wellness disciplines as cute hobbies rather than serious professional achievements. The irony wasn't lost on me that the man who advised other businesses on operational efficiency had never bothered to examine the operations of the business that shared his living space. If he had, he might have discovered that someone capable of building a wellness empire from nothing possessed skills that extended far beyond meditation and stretching. Now, regarding asset division, the lawyer continued, the wellness center represents the primary marital asset. Since the business was established during your marriage, you're entitled to 50% of its value, regardless of who provided the initial investment or daily management. I had to grip the metal shelving unit to steady myself. Marcus was planning to claim half of everything I'd built with my own hands, my own education, my own 15-hour days and sleepless nights spent growing a dream into reality. The wellness center wasn't just my business. It was my sanctuary, my life's work, my proof that a woman from the struggling neighborhoods of East Riverside could create something extraordinary. What kind of valuation are we looking at? Marcus asked, and I could hear the greed creeping into his voice. Conservative estimate puts the business at around $800,000, possibly more when we factor in equipment, client contracts, and location value. Your half would provide substantial financial security for your post-divorce transition. $800,000. Their estimate was laughably low. Either they'd done sloppy research, or Marcus had deliberately provided incomplete information about my business operations. The reality was that Serenity Wellness Center, with its cutting-edge equipment, established client base, corporate contracts, and prime real estate, was worth closer to $2.5 million. But Marcus had never paid attention to the financial statements I'd tried to share with him during our monthly marriage check-ins that he'd gradually stopped attending. "Excellent," Marcus continued. "And you're confident about the joint accounts? Sophia manages most of our banking, but she's never been strategic about asset protection. Never been strategic about asset protection." If Marcus only knew that the woman who'd spent 5 years earning a doctorate while working full-time had also spent the last 8 months quietly consulting with the best business attorneys in the state. If he'd bothered to look beyond his assumptions about my dreamy, creative personality, he might have noticed that someone capable of navigating commercial real estate deals, managing complex insurance policies, and maintaining relationships with dozens of corporate clients might possess more business acumen than he'd given me credit for. "Your wife doesn't seem like the type to create complications," the lawyer assured him. "Most wellness professionals prioritize harmony over conflict. She'll likely want to avoid legal battles and settle for whatever seems reasonable." Prioritize? Harmony over conflict. They had confused my commitment to creating peaceful environments for my clients with an inability to protect myself from predators. What they didn't understand was that building a successful wellness business required the same skills as winning a war: strategic thinking, resource management, competitive analysis, and the ability to anticipate your opponent's moves before they made them. The conversation was winding down, but I caught enough to understand their timeline. Marcus planned to serve me with divorce papers next Friday, while I was supposedly attending the Meridian Industries' final presentation, the career-defining meeting I'd been preparing for all year. He thought he'd have a long weekend to contact our mutual friends, secure our shared assets, and position himself as the reasonable party seeking an amicable separation. Standing there in my stockroom, surrounded by the meditation cushions, yoga, blocks, and essential oils that represented years of careful growth and community building, I felt something shift inside me. The woman Marcus had dismissed as too spiritual and harmony-focused was about to show him exactly what strategic thinking looked like when it was motivated by justice rather than greed. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Working late on?" "The Henderson Project, babe. Don't wait up. Love you." I typed back with steady fingers. "Of course, honey. Take all the time you need. I'll be working on some business planning myself." Business planning. If only he knew how accurate that was. While Marcus spent the evening congratulating himself on his brilliant surprise attack, I would be making some phone calls of my own. Tonight, the real strategic planning would begin. The student was about to become the teacher, and the lesson Marcus was going to learn would cost him everything he thought he was going to steal. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate. This for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. All right, let's get back to it. The history Marcus was so casually planning to rewrite stretched back 12 years to when we met at a business networking event in downtown Riverside Heights. I was a newly minted PhD working as a corporate wellness consultant, and he was a rising star at McKinsey & Associates, the city's most prestigious business consulting firm. Our courtship had been a whirlwind of shared ambitions and mutual respect, or so I'd believed. Marcus had been genuinely supportive when I first mentioned wanting to open my own wellness center. He'd even helped me scout locations, accompanying me to view the abandoned warehouse in the Arts District that would eventually become Serenity Wellness Center. The 15,000-square-foot space had been a gutted mess of broken windows and water damage, but I'd seen its potential immediately. Soaring ceilings perfect for aerial yoga, abundant natural light for meditation spaces, and enough room to create something truly transformative. "It's ambitious, Sophia," Marcus had said that first day, walking through the debris-strewn space. "But if anyone can turn this into something special, it's you." Back then, his encouragement had felt genuine. Now I realized it was probably more about the tax benefits of having a spouse with business losses to offset his growing income. The transformation of that warehouse had been my masterpiece. Working with architects, contractors, and designers, I'd created a space that seamlessly blended cutting-edge fitness technology with calming wellness environments. The main studio featured floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with natural light, bamboo floors that were perfect for everything from high-intensity interval training to restorative yoga, and a sound system sophisticated enough to support both meditation sessions and dance fitness classes. But the crown jewel was the therapeutic suite I'd designed based on my doctoral research in sports psychology. The space included float tanks, infrared saunas, massage therapy rooms, and a meditation garden that had been featured in 3 national wellness magazines. Every element had been carefully planned to address not just physical fitness, but mental and emotional wellness, a holistic approach that had attracted clients from across the tri-state area. Marcus had attended the grand opening 5 years ago, schmoozing with potential clients and posing for photos that made him look like a supportive husband. But as the business grew and demanded more of my time, his attitude had gradually shifted. What started as gentle teasing about my hippie clients evolved into pointed comments about my obsession with work-life balance, and eventually into outright dismissal of my professional achievements. The irony was particularly bitter because Serenity Wellness Center had become exactly the kind of success story Marcus claimed to help other businesses achieve. We'd grown from 3 employees to 23. Our client retention rate was 94%, compared to an industry average of 67%. We'd expanded from basic fitness classes to comprehensive corporate wellness programs, therapeutic services, and specialized workshops that attracted participants from neighboring states. More importantly, we'd built something that mattered. Sarah Chen, a software engineer, had overcome severe anxiety through our mindfulness programs and now led meditation workshops for other tech professionals. Robert Martinez, a veteran struggling with PTSD, had found peace through our trauma-informed yoga classes and eventually became one of our certified instructors. Jennifer Walsh, a busy executive, had transformed her relationship with stress through our corporate wellness program and convinced her company to invest in on-site employee wellness initiatives. These weren't just clients, they were success stories, transformed lives, and the foundation of a community I'd spent years carefully nurturing. Marcus saw them as revenue streams and networking opportunities, but to me, they represented the real value of what I'd built. You couldn't put a price tag on helping someone reclaim their health, their confidence, or their peace of mind. The business side of our marriage had always been complicated. Initially, Marcus had handled our joint finances while I focused on building the wellness center. He'd seemed pleased when the business became profitable, especially when our combined income allowed us to purchase the beautiful Victorian house in Riverside Heights Historic District. But as my success grew, his enthusiasm had waned. The first warning sign came 2 years ago during a dinner party with his colleagues from Mackenzie & Associates. "Sophia's doing well with her little studio," he'd said, gesturing dismissively while discussing our respective careers. "It's cute how passionate she is about helping people find their zen. Very fulfilling work, I'm sure, even if it's not exactly Fortune 500 material. Little studio. Cute passion. Not Fortune 500 material." Each phrase had stung, but I'd attributed his comments to wine and the masculine posturing that seemed to happen whenever his colleagues gathered. Looking back, I realized that dinner party had been the beginning of his systematic campaign to diminish my achievements in public, while privately benefiting from my success. The second warning sign came during last year's tax preparation. Marcus had always handled our returns, claiming his business background made him more qualified to navigate the complexities. But when I'd asked to review the documents before filing, he'd become defensive and evasive. "It's pretty complicated stuff, Sophia," he'd said, barely looking up from his laptop. "Lots of depreciation schedules and business deduction calculations. I know you're smart, but this isn't really your area of expertise." Not my area of expertise. I held a PhD in sports psychology, had completed graduate-level coursework in business administration, and had successfully managed the finances of a multi-million-dollar business for 5 years. But Marcus apparently believed that understanding tax implications was beyond my intellectual capacity. The third and most obvious warning sign had been his growing interest in our estate planning and asset protection strategies. Over the past 6 months, he'd initiated multiple conversations about updating our wills, reorganizing our investment accounts, and ensuring we had proper legal documentation for our business interests. "We need to be smart about this, Sophia," he'd explained during one particularly intense discussion. "The wellness industry can be volatile. What if something happened to the business? What if you got injured and couldn't work? We need contingency plans that protect both of us financially." At the time, his concern had seemed thoughtful and responsible. Now I understood that Marcus had been researching exactly how much my business was worth and determining the best strategies for claiming as much of it as possible during a divorce. His protective planning had actually been reconnaissance for his planned attack on everything I'd worked to build. Standing now in the wellness center I'd created from nothing, surrounded by the equipment I'd researched and purchased, the programs I'd developed and refined, and the community I'd spent years nurturing, I felt a surge of protective determination that went beyond anger. This wasn't just about money or property. It was about preserving something meaningful, something that had transformed not just my life, but the lives of hundreds of people who depended on this space for their physical and mental well-being. Marcus thought he could waltz in and claim half of my life's work based on the legal technicality of marriage. He'd confused my commitment to wellness and harmony with weakness and naivety. But someone who'd built a thriving business from an abandoned warehouse, who'd navigated complex commercial leases and insurance policies, who'd managed staff and maintained relationships with dozens of corporate clients, might possess more strategic thinking than he'd bothered to notice. Tonight, while Marcus worked late on his Henderson project, which I now suspected was actually another meeting with his divorce attorney, I would begin implementing a strategy of my own. The man who dismissed my business acumen was about to discover that his greatest tactical error had been underestimating the woman whose success had been subsidizing his lifestyle for years. The teacher was about to school the student, and the lesson would be more expensive than Marcus could possibly imagine. The pieces of Marcus's elaborate deception began falling into place over the next few days, as I paid closer attention to patterns I'd previously dismissed as coincidence. What I discovered was a calculated campaign that had been months in the making, revealing a level of strategic planning that would have impressed me if it hadn't been aimed at destroying my life. The first revelation came when I decided to review our credit card statements more carefully. Marcus had always handled our finances, insisting it was more efficient for one person to manage bills and statements. I'd agreed, trusting that his business background made him better equipped for financial management. Now, scrolling through 3 months of charges on my laptop, I realized how naive that trust had been. There were regular charges at the Metropolitan Club, Riverside Heights' most exclusive dining establishment, always for exactly 2 people, but never on evenings when Marcus and I had dined together. The amounts suggested lengthy business dinners with appetizers, entrees, wine, and dessert, the kind of meals designed to impress important clients or, as I now suspected, expensive legal consultants. More concerning were the charges at Whitman and Associates, a business consultation firm that specialized in asset valuation and divorce planning. 3 separate charges over the past 2 months, each for substantial amounts that suggested comprehensive business analysis rather than casual consultation. Marcus had been paying professionals to evaluate my business while pretending to support my expansion plans. But the most damning evidence was a charge I almost missed: a payment to Henderson Investigative Services. Marcus didn't have a Henderson project. He'd been lying about his evening meetings while actually hiring a private investigator to research my business operations, financial accounts, and probably my daily routines. My hands trembled slightly as I realized the scope of his surveillance. Every late night I'd spent at the Wellness Center preparing for the Meridian Industries presentation, every weekend workshop I'd attended to improve my therapeutic techniques, every coffee meeting with potential corporate clients. Marcus had probably known about all of it through his hired investigator. The second major revelation came from an unexpected source. Jennifer Walsh, the executive whose company had become one of our biggest corporate wellness clients, called with what she described as strange questions she'd received about Serenity Wellness Center. Sophia, I got the oddest call yesterday from someone claiming to be conducting a market research survey about corporate wellness providers, Jennifer explained during our Tuesday afternoon check-in. But the questions were incredibly specific about our contract terms, payment schedules, and renewal options. When I asked which firm was conducting the survey, the caller became evasive and hung up. My blood ran cold. What kind of specific questions, Jennifer? Details about our 3-year commitment, the exact monthly payment amounts, whether the contract was with you personally or with the business entity, and whether we'd implemented any succession planning in case of provider changes. It felt more like someone trying to understand the value and stability of your business relationships than genuine market research. Provider changes. Succession planning. Marcus wasn't just researching my current business value, he was investigating whether my corporate contracts would survive a change in ownership or management. He was determining whether he could potentially take over my client relationships after claiming half the business in the divorce. Did you recognize the voice? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Actually, now that you mention it, the caller did sound familiar. Professional, educated, maybe someone I'd met at one of your networking events? I can't place it exactly, but there was something about the tone. Marcus had attended several corporate wellness presentations with me over the past year, schmoozing with executives and positioning himself as my supportive business partner. Apparently, those networking opportunities had been reconnaissance missions, allowing him to identify key clients and establish relationships he could potentially exploit later. The third revelation was the most chilling. Sarah Chen, one of my most dedicated instructors and the software engineer who'd overcome anxiety through our programs, approached me after her Thursday evening mindfulness class with concerning news. "Dr. Reeves, I need to tell you about something. Weird that happened at work?" Sarah said, her usually calm demeanor showing signs of stress. Someone claiming to be from a business licensing agency called our HR department asking about Serenity Wellness Center's certification and insurance status. My certification and insurance status. These weren't casual inquiries. They were the kind of detailed investigations conducted before legal challenges or business acquisitions. The HR director thought it was strange because we'd never had issues with vendor compliance, and your certifications have always been impeccable, Sarah continued. But when she tried to call the number back to clarify what information they needed, it went to a generic voicemail box. Marcus had been systematically researching every aspect of my business operations, looking for potential vulnerabilities or compliance issues he could exploit during divorce proceedings. He was building a case that I was somehow unqualified or negligent in my business management, despite my perfect track record with licensing boards and insurance providers. The pattern became even clearer when I started paying attention to Marcus's behavior around the house. Conversations he'd initiated over the past month suddenly made sinister sense in this new context. His casual questions about my daily schedule, "What time do you usually finish up at the studio on Wednesdays?" weren't loving interest in my routine. They were intelligence gathering for his investigators' surveillance reports. His sudden interest in my business insurance policies, "Just want to make sure we're properly covered if something happens to the equipment," wasn't protective. Planning. He was researching exactly what assets were covered and how much they were worth. His repeated suggestions that I should document everything better for tax purposes. "The IRS loves detailed records, Sophia," weren't helpful advice. He was encouraging me to create the comprehensive financial documentation that would make asset division easier during divorce proceedings. Most manipulative of all were his recent comments about my stress levels and work-life balance. Marcus had been creating a narrative that I was overwhelmed, possibly unstable, and struggling to manage the demands of running a successful business. In divorce court, this psychological portrait could be used to argue that I needed professional management assistance or that the business would be better served under his more stable oversight. The timeline of his deception was breathtaking in its calculated precision. The credit card statements showed that his first meeting with business consultants had occurred just 3 days after I'd announced the potential Meridian Industries contract. Marcus had seen my biggest professional opportunity and immediately begun planning how to claim credit and profit from my success. His investigative research had intensified dramatically over the past 6 weeks, coinciding exactly with the period when I'd been working longest hours to prepare for the Meridian presentation. While I'd been exhausting myself to secure our financial future, Marcus had been systematically planning to steal that future for himself. The most disturbing element was how thoroughly he'd researched my vulnerabilities. The private investigators. Reports probably included details about my daily routines, my closest professional relationships, my financial habits, and potentially even my personal insecurities. Marcus had weaponized 12 years of intimate knowledge about my character, my dreams, and my fears. But his most critical miscalculation was assuming that the woman who'd built a multi-million-dollar business from nothing would be unprepared for a fight. Marcus had confused my commitment to wellness and harmony with an inability to protect myself when threatened. He'd mistaken my trust in our marriage for naivety about human nature. What Marcus didn't understand was that someone capable of transforming an abandoned warehouse into a thriving wellness empire, someone who'd successfully navigated complex commercial negotiations and built relationships with dozens of corporate clients, might possess more strategic thinking than he'd ever bothered to discover. Tomorrow night, while Marcus believed he was putting the finishing touches on his brilliant surprise attack, I would begin implementing a counter-strategy that would make his months of planning look like amateur hour. The hunter was about to discover that his prey had been watching him hunt. That Friday evening, as I watched Marcus pack his briefcase with the satisfied efficiency of someone executing a well-rehearsed plan, something fundamental shifted inside me. The woman who had spent the past week uncovering evidence of systematic betrayal was no longer the same person who had been organizing inventory in her stockroom just days earlier. I wasn't a victim waiting to be ambushed. I was a strategist who had been unconsciously preparing for this battle for years. "Big weekend ahead with the Henderson project?" I asked casually, testing whether he would maintain his fabricated story even now. "Unfortunately, yes," Marcus replied without missing a beat, his lie delivered with the smooth confidence of someone who believed his deception was flawless. "Clients demanding some last-minute revisions to the operational restructuring plan. You know how these corporate types can be. Everything's urgent until it's not." The ease with which he constructed these fictional scenarios was almost impressive. Marcus had created an entire imaginary business relationship, complete with demanding clients and weekend deadlines, all to cover his meetings with divorce attorneys and private investigators. But as I watched him adjust his tie and check his appearance in the hallway mirror, I realized that his greatest tactical error wasn't the lying itself. It was his complete failure to recognize that he was lying to someone who understood strategy better than he did. After Marcus left for what I now knew was likely his final preparation meeting before serving me with divorce papers on Monday, I sat in our living room and took inventory of my actual situation. Not the helpless victim scenario Marcus had constructed in his mind, but the reality of what I had built and what I was capable of protecting. The first revelation was how thoroughly I had been unconsciously preparing for exactly this moment. My insistence on maintaining separate business accounts hadn't been paranoia. It had been prudent business practice that would now prove legally crucial. Every financial transaction was documented, every business decision was recorded, and every asset was clearly traceable to its source. My doctoral training in sports psychology had required extensive coursework in research methodology, statistical analysis, and human behavior prediction. Skills that seemed academic in a university setting suddenly felt remarkably applicable to anticipating an opponent's moves and developing counter-strategies. I hadn't just studied how people performed under pressure. I had learned how to identify weaknesses, exploit advantages, and maintain composure during high-stakes confrontations. The business management experience I'd gained over 5 years of running Serenity Wellness Center was equally relevant. Negotiating with contractors, managing insurance claims, handling difficult clients, and navigating regulatory compliance had all required the same fundamental skills Marcus would need for his legal assault: careful planning, thorough documentation, strategic thinking, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. But perhaps most importantly, I realized that building a successful wellness business had taught me something Marcus had never learned: how to read people. My work with clients struggling with anxiety, depression, trauma, and stress had developed my ability to recognize deception, manipulation, and hidden agendas. The same intuition that helped me identify when clients weren't being honest about their symptoms or commitment levels had been quietly cataloging inconsistencies in Marcus's behavior for months. Looking back, I could see that my subconscious had been registering warning signs long before my conscious mind acknowledged the threat. My decision to upgrade our business insurance 6 months ago hadn't been random. It had been prompted by some instinctive recognition that I needed additional protection. My choice to maintain detailed backup records of all business documents hadn't been obsessive organization. It had been an unconscious preparation for potential legal challenges. Even my recent expansion of professional relationships suddenly seemed strategically prescient. The connections I'd been building with corporate clients, legal professionals who attended my stress management workshops, and other successful business owners weren't just networking. They were the foundation of a support system I would need to defend everything I'd worked to build. Saturday morning brought a moment of crystalline clarity as I conducted my usual weekend inventory of the wellness center. Walking through the meditation garden I'd designed, past the therapeutic equipment I'd researched and purchased, through the studios where hundreds of people had transformed their lives under my guidance, I felt a surge of protective determination that went far beyond personal anger. This wasn't just about punishing Marcus for his betrayal. It was about preserving something meaningful that extended far beyond our marriage. Sarah Chen's anxiety recovery, Robert Martinez's trauma healing, Jennifer Walsh's stress management breakthrough, and dozens of other transformation stories represented the real value of what I'd built. Marcus saw financial assets and revenue streams. I saw human lives that had been fundamentally improved through careful, compassionate professional work. The realization that shifted everything was understanding that Marcus had made the classic mistake of confusing correlation with causation. He assumed that because I prioritized wellness and harmony in my professional life, I must be incapable of strategic thinking or aggressive self-defense. He had mistaken my choice to create peaceful environments for my clients as evidence that I was inherently passive and conflict-averse. But someone who had successfully managed the stress and personalities involved in commercial construction projects, who had negotiated complex insurance policies and corporate wellness contracts, who had handled difficult clients and demanding regulatory inspections, was fully capable of strategic planning and decisive action when the situation required it. Marcus's fundamental error was believing that empathy and strategic intelligence were mutually exclusive. He couldn't conceive that the same person who helped trauma survivors find peace could also develop sophisticated business protection strategies. His worldview apparently didn't allow for the possibility that someone could be both nurturing and ruthless, both healing-focused and tactically brilliant. By Sunday afternoon, my perspective had completely transformed. Instead of feeling betrayed and vulnerable, I felt energized and focused. Marcus had handed me an opportunity to demonstrate exactly what kind of strategic thinker he'd been married to for 12 years without ever bothering to notice. The woman who had earned a PhD while working full-time, who had transformed an abandoned warehouse into a thriving business empire, who had built meaningful relationships with hundreds of clients and dozens of corporate partners, was about to show Marcus exactly what he'd been too arrogant to recognize. More importantly, I realized that every challenge I'd overcome in building Serenity Wellness Center had been preparation for this moment. Dealing with contractors who tried to overcharge me had taught me to recognize manipulation. Managing employees with different personalities and motivations had developed my ability to predict behavior and manage complex relationships. Negotiating with insurance companies and corporate clients had honed my skills in high-stakes discussions where preparation and documentation were crucial. Marcus thought he was surprising an unsuspecting wife with a carefully planned legal assault. What he was actually doing was challenging someone who had spent 5 years successfully managing complex business operations under pressure, someone who understood both human psychology and strategic planning, someone who had been unconsciously preparing for exactly this kind of battle without even realizing it. The student was about to become the teacher, and the lesson Marcus was going to receive would be worth far more than his expensive legal consultations. He had spent months researching how to steal half of my business. I was about to demonstrate why someone capable of building that business from nothing would never allow it to be stolen. Tomorrow, while Marcus prepared to serve me with divorce papers he believed would devastate and overwhelm me, I would begin implementing a counterattack that would make his months of planning look like amateur hour. The woman he had underestimated was about to remind him why underestimation was always a tactical mistake. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that usually energized me for the week ahead, but today carried the electric tension of impending warfare. While Marcus prepared for what he believed would be his surprise attack, I was implementing the first phase of a counteroffensive that would redefine the entire battlefield. My first call went to Victoria Sterling, a business attorney whose expertise in asset protection had been recommended by 3 different corporate clients. Unlike Marcus's choice to work with a traditional family law firm, I had specifically sought someone who understood the complexities of business ownership and intellectual property rights in divorce proceedings. Dr. Reeves, Victoria's voice, carried the confidence of someone accustomed to high-stakes legal battles. I've reviewed the preliminary information you provided over the weekend. What you've described isn't just divorce planning. It's attempted business appropriation through legal manipulation. Within 2 hours, I was sitting in Victoria's downtown office, a sleek space that radiated the kind of professional competence I needed on my side. Her preliminary assessment was both validating and strategically crucial. Your business structure is remarkably well protected, Victoria explained, reviewing the documentation I'd brought. The wellness center was established using inheritance, funds prior to your marriage. All subsequent investments were clearly documented as separate property, and your husband has never been listed on any business licenses, insurance policies, or commercial agreements. His claim to 50% of the business value has no legal foundation. But Victoria's most valuable insight concerned Marcus's tactical errors. Your husband's attorney is apparently operating under the assumption that all business growth during marriage is automatically marital property. That's a common misconception that works in cases where both spouses contribute to business development. In your situation, where you've maintained complete operational and financial control, his legal theory is fundamentally flawed. The second crucial call went to Alexander Chen, a forensic accountant whose specialized practice focused on business valuation disputes. Unlike the consultants Marcus had hired to estimate my business worth, Alexander's job was to establish definitive proof of how Serenity Wellness Center's value had been created and maintained. Dr. Reeves, based on the financial records you've provided, I can trace every dollar of business growth directly to your individual efforts, education, and investments, Alexander explained during our Tuesday afternoon meeting. More importantly, I can demonstrate that your husband's contributions to business development have been essentially non-existent. Alexander's analysis revealed something that would prove devastating to Marcus's case. Not only had Marcus never contributed financially to the business, but his involvement had actually created measurable costs through increased insurance premiums, additional liability coverage, and administrative expenses related to his occasional presence at business events. In forensic accounting terms, Alexander continued, your husband has been a net drain on business resources rather than a contributor to business value. Any legal claim he makes to business ownership will be easily refuted with quantitative evidence. The third element of my defensive strategy involved something Marcus would never have anticipated: comprehensive documentation of his systematic deception. Working with Rebecca Torres, a private investigator who specialized in financial fraud cases, I began building an evidentiary record that would expose the calculated nature of his betrayal. Your husband's activities over the past 6 months constitute what we call divorce planning misconduct, Rebecca explained during our confidential consultation. The private investigator he hired, the business valuation consultants, the systematic research into your client relationships, all of this demonstrates premeditated deception designed to gain unfair advantage in divorce proceedings. Rebecca's investigation uncovered details that shocked even me. Marcus's hired investigator had been conducting surveillance not just on my business activities, but on my personal routines, my closest friendships, and my therapeutic work with individual clients. The invasion of privacy extended far beyond what would be considered reasonable preparation for divorce proceedings. Dr. Reeves, your husband has been building what appears to be a comprehensive psychological profile designed to support claims that you're emotionally unstable or professionally incompetent, Rebecca continued. The investigative reports include observations about your work schedule, your stress responses, and your interactions with clients and employees. This isn't divorce preparation. It's character assassination research. But Rebecca's most valuable discovery was evidence that Marcus had been actively attempting to undermine my business relationships while preparing for divorce. Phone records showed he had contacted several of my corporate clients using false pretenses, ostensibly to verify contract details, but actually to plant seeds of doubt about my reliability and business stability. Your husband has been conducting what amounts to a sabotage campaign, Rebecca explained. He's been trying to weaken your business position before filing for divorce, presumably to support arguments that the business needs his management, or that you're incapable of maintaining corporate relationships independently. By Wednesday evening, the foundation of my legal defense was solidly in place, but I realized that purely defensive strategies wouldn't be sufficient. Marcus had demonstrated such calculated malice that I needed to ensure he faced meaningful consequences for his attempted fraud. Working with Victoria, I developed what she called a comprehensive accountability strategy that would address not just the divorce proceedings, but the broader pattern of deceptive and potentially illegal behavior Marcus had engaged in. Dr. Reeves, your husband's actions may constitute several forms of legal misconduct, Victoria explained. Using false pretenses to research your business, attempting to manipulate corporate clients, hiring investigators to conduct surveillance on your therapeutic work with patients, these activities could violate business interference laws, privacy, regulations, and potentially professional ethics standards. The fourth element of my preparation involved something that would have impressed my doctoral advisors: psychological warfare based on understanding Marcus's personality and motivations better than he understood them himself. Marcus's greatest weakness was his arrogance. He genuinely believed he was more intelligent, more strategic, and more capable than I was. This overconfidence had led him to underestimate my abilities while overestimating his own cleverness. My counterattack would exploit this fundamental miscalculation. The beauty of your husband's approach, Victoria observed, is that he's documented his own misconduct extensively. The credit card records showing payments to investigators and business consultants, the phone logs proving unauthorized contact with your clients, the timeline demonstrating premeditated deception. He's essentially built the case against himself. By Thursday morning, I had also quietly secured protection for the most valuable elements of my business that couldn't be measured in financial terms. Working with my insurance agent, I had upgraded our liability coverage and added specific protections for business disruption, intellectual property theft, and reputation damage. More importantly, I had begun discreet conversations with my most important clients about potential business stability concerns. Rather than waiting for Marcus's sabotage efforts to create problems, I proactively addressed any questions about Serenity Wellness Center's management and long-term viability. Jennifer, I wanted to give you a heads up about some personal changes. That won't affect our business relationship but might generate some gossip, I explained during my call with our biggest corporate client. My husband and I are going through a divorce, and there may be some legal proceedings that could attract attention. I want to assure you that our corporate wellness programs will continue without interruption. Jennifer's response was both supportive and strategically valuable. Sophia, after working with you for 2 years, I can't imagine anyone questioning your professionalism or business competence. If anyone suggests otherwise, they clearly don't know what they're talking about. Similar conversations with key clients, employees, and business partners created a network of support that would be crucial if Marcus attempted to damage my professional reputation during divorce proceedings. Friday afternoon, as I reviewed the comprehensive defensive strategy we'd assembled over 4 intensive days, I felt a profound shift in my emotional state. The anxiety and betrayal I'd experienced upon discovering Marcus's deception had transformed into something far more powerful: strategic confidence backed by superior preparation. Marcus had spent months secretly planning what he believed would be a devastating surprise attack on an unsuspecting victim. What he'd actually done was give a strategic thinker with superior resources and better legal counsel ample time to prepare an overwhelming defensive response. The woman he'd underestimated was about to demonstrate exactly why underestimation was always a tactical mistake. Tonight, while Marcus finalized his plans to serve me with divorce papers on Monday morning, I would be reviewing the legal documents that would turn his surprise attack into his complete and utter defeat. The weekend before Marcus planned to serve me with divorce papers brought revelations that elevated his betrayal from mere marital deception to something approaching systematic fraud. What I discovered during those 48 hours would transform our impending legal battle from a divorce proceeding into a comprehensive investigation of financial crimes. Saturday morning's breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Angela Morrison, the accountant who handled payroll for several small businesses in the Arts District, called with information that made my blood run cold. "Dr. Reeves, I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly, but something's been bothering me. About a conversation I had with your husband last month," Angela began hesitantly. "Marcus contacted me claiming he was exploring accounting services for business expansion, but his questions were oddly specific about your employee classification and compensation structure." Employee classification and compensation structure. These weren't casual inquiries about potential services. They were detailed investigations into potential vulnerabilities in my business operations. "What kind of specific questions?" I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. He wanted to know whether your instructors were classified as employees or independent contractors, how you handled benefits and tax withholding, whether you had any potential labor law compliance issues. When I told him everything appeared properly structured, he seemed disappointed rather than reassured. Marcus had been researching whether my business had any regulatory vulnerabilities he could exploit during divorce proceedings. If he'd found classification errors or compliance problems, he could have argued that the business was poorly managed and needed his oversight, or that potential liabilities reduced its value significantly. But Angela's most disturbing revelation concerned Marcus's interest in my personal financial management. He also asked whether I'd noticed any unusual spending patterns or financial decisions that seemed impulsive or irresponsible. I told him that wasn't information I would share, even if I had it, but the question itself struck me as inappropriate. Marcus had been trying to build a case that I was financially irresponsible, presumably to support arguments that he should control our shared assets, or that I was incapable of managing business finances independently. The calculated nature of this character assassination attempt was breathtaking in its malice. Sunday brought even more damaging discoveries through Rebecca Torres's expanded investigation. Her weekend research had uncovered financial records that revealed the true extent of Marcus's deception and preparation. Dr. Reeves, your husband has been systematically moving money for the past 4 months, Rebecca explained during our emergency Sunday evening conference call. He's opened 3 separate accounts at different banks, each using his business address to avoid mail coming to your shared residence. 3 separate accounts. Marcus hadn't just been planning to claim half of my assets. He'd been actively hiding his own assets to minimize what I could claim during the divorce settlement. The first account appears to be where he's been depositing consulting fees from clients I can't identify, Rebecca continued. Either he's been taking on unreported side work, or he's been inflating his billing to existing clients and pocketing the difference. Unreported income and potential client fraud. Marcus's attempt to steal my business was apparently just one element of a broader pattern of financial misconduct that could have serious professional and legal consequences. The second account contains funds that appear to have been transferred from your joint investments without your knowledge or consent. He's been liquidating mutual funds and retirement accounts gradually, presumably to avoid triggering automatic notifications. My hands trembled as I realized the scope of his theft. Marcus hadn't just been planning to steal my business, he'd already been stealing our shared retirement savings while preparing for divorce. The third account is the most concerning, Rebecca continued. It contains payments from Henderson Investigative Services, but the amounts are much larger than what private investigation services typically cost. Either he's been paying for extensive surveillance, or Henderson is providing additional services that go beyond standard investigation work. Additional services beyond standard investigation work. The implications were terrifying. Had Marcus been paying for falsified reports, illegal surveillance, attempts to sabotage my business relationships or reputation? Monday morning brought the week's most shocking revelation through Victoria Sterling's legal network. Her contact at the State Bar Association had provided information about Marcus's chosen attorney that fundamentally changed my understanding of his legal strategy. Dr. Reeves, Thompson & Associates isn't just aggressive family law. They specialize in what the legal community calls scorched earth divorce tactics, Victoria explained during our early morning call. Their approach involves systematic destruction of the opposing party's reputation, financial security, and professional relationships. Scorched earth tactics. Marcus wasn't just trying to claim half of my business. He was planning to destroy everything I'd built that he couldn't steal. Thompson & Associates typically begins with character assassination, designed to make their opponent appear unstable, incompetent, or dishonest, Victoria continued. They'll attack your professional credentials, your business management capabilities, your personal relationships, anything that might make a judge question your fitness to control significant assets. The pattern of Marcus's behavior over the past month suddenly made perfect sense. His comments about my stress levels, his suggestions that I was working too hard, his attempts to position himself as the stable, responsible spouse, all of it had been preparation for a legal assault on my character and competence. More concerning is their typical timeline, Victoria added. Thompson & Associates usually files for emergency protective orders immediately after serving divorce papers, claiming the opposing spouse poses a financial threat or is likely to hide assets. They try to freeze accounts and assume temporary control of business operations before their opponent can respond. Emergency protective orders and temporary business control. Marcus's plan wasn't just to steal half of my business. He was planning to take operational control of Serenity Wellness Center, while divorce proceedings dragged on for months or potentially years. But Victoria's most valuable intelligence concerned Thompson & Associates' typical weaknesses. Their aggressive approach only works when they're fighting unprepared opponents. When faced with comprehensive documentation and proactive legal strategy, their tactics often backfire spectacularly because judges recognize the manipulative nature of their approach. Tuesday brought revelations about Marcus's activities that extended beyond financial misconduct into potential criminal behavior. Alexander Chen's forensic accounting review had uncovered evidence that Marcus had been accessing my business accounts without authorization. Dr. Reeves, your husband has been logging into your business banking system using credentials that were never officially shared with him, Alexander explained during our confidential meeting. The access logs show regular activity over the past 6 weeks, always during hours when you were conducting client sessions, and unlikely to notice unusual account activity. Unauthorized access to business accounts. Marcus had been conducting illegal surveillance of my financial operations while planning to claim those same operations were somehow his legal right to control. More seriously, there's evidence he's been attempting to modify certain account settings and contact information, Alexander continued. It appears he was trying to redirect bank notifications and account statements to email addresses he controlled, rather than your registered business address. Marcus had been attempting to assume control of my business communications, presumably to intercept financial information and potentially manipulate my understanding of the business's financial status during divorce proceedings. The scope of his deception was so comprehensive that it suggested months of careful planning coordinated with professional advisors who specialized in financial manipulation. This wasn't a husband seeking fair divorce settlement. This was a calculated criminal conspiracy designed to systematically steal everything I'd worked to build. Wednesday evening's revelation was perhaps the most disturbing. Sarah Chen approached me after her mindfulness class with information that revealed how extensively Marcus had been manipulating my professional relationships. Dr. Reeves, I need to tell you about something that happened at work that I didn't think was important until now, Sarah said, her usual calm demeanor showing signs of genuine distress. 3 weeks ago, Marcus called our corporate wellness coordinator asking detailed questions about our contract renewal process and whether there were any performance concerns with your services. Performance concerns. Marcus had been actively trying to undermine my most important business relationships while pretending to support my career success. Our coordinator told him that everyone was extremely satisfied with your programs and that renewal was automatic unless there were serious problems, Sarah continued. But Marcus kept pressing, asking whether the company had backup plans if you became unavailable, whether we'd considered other wellness providers, whether there were any complaints about your professionalism. Marcus had been planting seeds of doubt about my reliability and business stability with my own clients, presumably to create problems he could then point to as evidence that I was losing control of my business operations. As I absorbed the full scope of Marcus's systematic betrayal, I realized that what I'd initially discovered as divorce planning had evolved into something far more serious. This wasn't just marital deception, it was financial fraud, unauthorized access to business accounts, character assassination, and potentially criminal conspiracy. The woman Marcus had planned to surprise and overwhelm with divorce papers was about to surprise him with evidence of criminal misconduct that could destroy not just his divorce case, but his professional career and his personal freedom. Tomorrow, while Marcus prepared to serve me with what he believed would be devastating legal papers, I would be coordinating with law enforcement agencies about financial crimes that made divorce proceedings seem trivial by comparison. Thursday morning arrived with the crystalline clarity that sometimes precedes life-altering moments. As I prepared for what Marcus believed would be the most devastating day of my life, I was actually implementing the final phase of a counteroffensive that would transform his planned victory into complete and utter destruction. At exactly 8:15 a.m., 30 minutes before the Meridian Industries presentation that Marcus thought would provide perfect cover for his surprise attack, I initiated what Victoria Sterling had dubbed Operation Clean Sweep. The first call went to Riverside Heights Community Bank, where our primary joint checking account was held. "This is Dr. Sophia Reeves," I said to the bank manager I'd been cultivating a relationship with for the past week. "I need to implement the fraud protection measures we discussed. There's evidence that unauthorized individuals have been accessing our accounts with intent to commit financial crimes." Within minutes, our joint accounts were frozen pending investigation. Not the gradual, careful asset protection Marcus had been planning, but immediate, comprehensive lockdown based on documented evidence of attempted fraud. Every account, every credit line, every financial instrument that bore both our names was suddenly inaccessible to Marcus, while remaining available to me through the business accounts he'd never been authorized to access. The second call went to Detective Maria Santos at the Riverside Heights Financial Crimes Division. Unlike the civil divorce proceedings Marcus was expecting, this conversation was about criminal charges that could result in prosecution, professional ruin, and potential imprisonment. "Dr. Reeves, based on the evidence your attorney provided yesterday, we're opening a formal investigation into unauthorized computer access, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft," Detective Santos confirmed. "We'll need Mr. Reeves to come in for questioning this afternoon." The third call was perhaps the most satisfying. I contacted the State Bar Association's ethics hotline to report that Marcus's attorney, Thompson and Associates, appeared to be participating in a scheme involving criminal misconduct rather than legitimate divorce proceedings. "The evidence suggests they've been coordinating with their client to commit financial fraud while using divorce proceedings as cover for criminal activity," I explained to the ethics investigator. "This goes far beyond aggressive legal representation into potential criminal conspiracy." By 9 a.m., while Marcus was presumably reviewing his final preparations for serving me with divorce papers, his entire legal and financial strategy was collapsing in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The first indication of his impending disaster came at 9:47 a.m., when his phone rang during what I knew was his final coordination meeting with his attorney. I was conducting my morning meditation class, guiding 12 clients through breathing exercises that kept me centered while Marcus's world began imploding just a few miles away. Through Rebecca Torres's surveillance network, I knew that Marcus had left Thompson and Associates' office within minutes of that phone call, his confident demeanor replaced by confusion and growing panic. The bank's notification about frozen accounts had apparently caught him completely off guard. At 10:30, my phone rang with Marcus's name on the caller ID. I let it go to voicemail while continuing my session on stress management, a topic that was about to become painfully relevant for my soon-to-be ex-husband. The voicemail was everything. I'd hoped it would be, "Sophia, something's wrong with our bank accounts. They're saying there's a fraud investigation? Call me immediately. This has to be some kind of mistake. A mistake." After months of calculated deception, systematic theft, and criminal misconduct, Marcus still believed he could control the narrative by dismissing inconvenient developments as misunderstandings. I called Victoria Sterling instead. Phase 1 is complete. Marcus has discovered the account freeze and is attempting to reach me. How long before the criminal investigation interview? Detective Santos confirmed 2 p.m. Victoria replied with satisfaction. Your husband will be receiving official notification within the hour. His attorney has also been contacted by the Bar Association about the ethics investigation. The second wave of Marcus's destruction arrived precisely at 11:15 a.m. Thompson and Associates called him to schedule an emergency meeting, not to coordinate their legal strategy, but to discuss their withdrawal from representation due to potential professional ethics violations. Rebecca's surveillance team reported that Marcus had emerged from that 15-minute meeting looking like a man who'd just discovered his parachute had been replaced with an anvil. His confident stride was gone, replaced by the unsteady movement of someone whose entire worldview was collapsing in real time. At noon, I finally returned Marcus's increasingly frantic phone calls. By then, he'd left 6 voicemails, each one more desperate than the last as he began to understand that his brilliant surprise attack had somehow become a catastrophic defeat. "Sophia, what the hell is happening?" His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "The bank, the lawyers, everyone's talking about investigations and criminal charges. This is insane." I maintained the calm, measured tone I used with difficult clients. "Marcus, I think you should contact a criminal defense attorney. It seems like your activities over the past few months have attracted some unwanted attention from law enforcement." "My activities? I haven't done anything wrong. I was just preparing for divorce proceedings, which is completely legal." "Divorce proceedings?" I paused thoughtfully. "Is that what you call unauthorized access to business banking systems? Is that how you describe stealing retirement funds without spousal consent? Is that your term for hiring investigators to conduct illegal surveillance?" The silence on the other end stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had lost all its earlier confidence. "Sophia, you don't understand. I can explain everything. This is all a misunderstanding." "Actually, Marcus, I understand perfectly. You spent months planning what you thought would be a surprise attack on an unsuspecting wife. What you actually did was document your own criminal misconduct so thoroughly that prosecutors are calling it one of the most comprehensive evidence packages they've ever seen." "Evidence packages? Prosecutors?" His voice cracked slightly. "Sophia, we can work this out. We don't need lawyers and investigators. We can handle this privately." The desperation in his tone was almost pitiful. Marcus was beginning to realize that his months of careful planning had created an evidentiary trail that led directly to criminal charges and professional destruction. "I'm afraid it's too late for private resolution, Marcus. When you committed financial fraud and unauthorized computer access, it stopped being a private matter. These are criminal charges that will be prosecuted regardless of my personal preferences." 2 p.m. sharp, while I was conducting a stress reduction workshop for corporate executives, Detective Santos was beginning her interview with Marcus about his illegal activities. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was teaching people how to manage pressure and maintain composure, while my husband was discovering what real pressure felt like for the first time in his life. The afternoon brought a steady stream of updates from Victoria's office as Marcus's situation deteriorated with mathematical precision. His new attorney, a criminal defense lawyer rather than the family law specialist he'd originally planned to need, was apparently struggling to find any angle of defense that didn't involve admitting to the criminal misconduct we'd documented so thoroughly. "Dr. Reeves, your husband's attorney has requested a meeting to discuss potential plea agreements," Victoria reported during our 4:00 p.m. call. "They're apparently hoping to avoid prosecution by offering full restitution and cooperation with investigators." Plea agreements. Marcus had gone from planning to steal half my business to begging prosecutors not to send him to prison for the crimes he'd committed while planning that theft. By 5:00 p.m., the final element of Marcus's destruction was complete. The State Bar Association had opened a formal investigation into Thompson & Associates' potential participation in criminal misconduct, effectively destroying their reputation in the legal community, while Marcus faced potential criminal charges that could result in years of imprisonment. As I locked up Serenity Wellness Center that evening and reflected on the day's events, I felt a profound sense of justice that went beyond personal satisfaction. Marcus had spent months planning to destroy everything I'd built through systematic deception and criminal misconduct. Instead, his overconfidence and fundamental misunderstanding of who he was fighting had led him to document his own criminal behavior so thoroughly that his planned victory had become his complete and utter defeat. The woman he'd dismissed as too focused on harmony and wellness to fight back strategically had just demonstrated that someone capable of building a multi-million-dollar business from nothing was also capable of destroying the life of anyone foolish enough to threaten that. Business through criminal means. Marcus's surprise attack had become his total surrender, and the lesson he was learning about underestimation would cost him everything he'd thought he was going to steal. The following week brought a cascade of consequences that would reshape Marcus's life in ways he could never have anticipated when he first began planning what he thought would be his brilliant strategic victory. What unfolded was a masterclass in how comprehensive preparation and superior intelligence could transform attempted victimization into overwhelming justice. Mondays. Emergency court hearing drew an unprecedented crowd for what should have been routine divorce proceedings. Word had spread through Riverside Heights legal community about the criminal charges, the ethics investigation, and the spectacular reversal of what had been expected to be a standard asset division case. Judge Patricia Blackwood entered the DI courtroom with the stern expression of someone who'd spent her weekend reviewing evidence of systematic fraud and criminal conspiracy. The preliminary documents Victoria had filed painted a picture of deception so comprehensive that it had attracted attention from multiple law enforcement agencies. "This is highly unusual," Judge Blackwood began, her voice carrying the authority of 3 decades on the bench. "What was filed as a standard divorce proceeding has revealed evidence of criminal misconduct that requires immediate judicial intervention to protect both the integrity of these proceedings and the rights of the plaintiff." Marcus sat beside his hastily retained criminal defense attorney, looking nothing like the confident business consultant who'd been planning his surprise attack just days earlier. His expensive suits had been replaced by a rumpled appearance that suggested sleepless nights and growing desperation. "Mr. Reeves," Judge Blackwood continued, "the evidence presented by the plaintiff includes documentation of unauthorized computer access, systematic theft of marital assets, fraudulent business practices, and what appears to be conspiracy to commit multiple felonies. These are serious criminal charges that extend far beyond family law." The judge's systematic review of the evidence was devastating. She methodically presented each element of Marcus's criminal behavior, from the unauthorized access to my business, accounts to the theft of our retirement funds, from the illegal surveillance to the attempts at client sabotage. "Most concerning," Judge Blackwood observed, "is the premeditated nature of these crimes. This wasn't impulsive misconduct during a difficult divorce. This was months of calculated criminal planning designed to systematically steal assets belonging to the plaintiff." Marcus's attorney attempted a weak defense. "Your Honor, my client maintains that his actions were motivated by concern for marital assets and legitimate preparation for divorce proceedings." Judge Blackwood's response was withering. "Counselor, unauthorized access to computer systems is a federal crime regardless of motivation. Theft of retirement funds without spousal consent is criminal fraud regardless of marital status. Your client's concerns don't transform criminal behavior into legitimate legal strategy." The judge's final ruling was more comprehensive than Victoria had even hoped for. "This court finds overwhelming evidence of criminal misconduct designed to defraud the plaintiff of assets she legally owns. All emergency motions filed by the defendant are denied. All claims to plaintiff's separate business property are dismissed with prejudice." But Judge Blackwood wasn't finished. "Furthermore, this court is referring this case to federal prosecutors for potential charges related to computer crimes and wire fraud. The defendant is ordered to make immediate restitution for all stolen marital assets and is prohibited from any contact with the plaintiff's business, employees, or clients." The courtroom erupted in murmurs as the full scope of Marcus's defeat became clear. He'd gone from planning to claim half of my business to facing federal criminal charges and complete financial ruin. Tuesday brought news that Marcus's professional destruction was accelerating beyond even my most optimistic expectations. Detective Santos called with updates that demonstrated how thoroughly his criminal behavior had been documented. "Dr. Reeves, your ex-husband's case has been transferred to the federal level due to the computer crimes and interstate financial fraud," Detective Santos explained. "The FBI's Financial Crimes Division is particularly interested in his use of commercial banking systems to commit unauthorized access crimes." Federal charges. Marcus had escalated his situation from state-level financial misconduct to federal crimes that carried potential prison sentences measured in years rather than months. More importantly for your situation, Detective Santos continued, the restitution order includes not just the retirement funds he stole, but compensation for business damages, legal fees, and punitive damages related to his attempts to sabotage your professional relationships. The financial implications were staggering. Marcus would be required to compensate me not just for the money he'd stolen, but for the business damage his sabotage attempts had caused and the enormous legal costs his criminal behavior had necessitated. Wednesdays. Revelation came through Victoria's connections in the legal community. Thompson and Associates, the law firm Marcus had chosen for their scorched earth tactics, was facing catastrophic professional consequences for their participation in what investigators were calling a criminal conspiracy. The State Bar Association has suspended Thompson and Associates' practicing licenses pending investigation, Victoria reported with undisguised satisfaction. They're being investigated for knowingly participating in criminal fraud while representing it as legitimate legal strategy. The law firm that had specialized in destroying lives through aggressive tactics was discovering that their approach only worked against unprepared opponents. When faced with comprehensive documentation and superior legal strategy, their unethical methods had become evidence of their own professional misconduct. 3 other clients have filed complaints claiming Thompson and Associates encouraged them to engage in questionable financial practices during their divorce proceedings, Victoria continued. Your case appears to have opened floodgates for other victims of their unethical tactics. Thursday brought perhaps the most satisfying development of all. Marcus's consulting firm, McKenzie and Associates, called to inform me that they were terminating his partnership and pursuing legal action to recover any company assets he might have misappropriated during his criminal activities. Dr. Reeves, we want to assure you that McKenzie and Associates had no knowledge of Mr. Reeves's criminal behavior, the senior partner explained during our conversation. We're conducting a comprehensive audit of his client relationships and financial activities to ensure no company resources were involved in his illegal schemes. Marcus's professional career was effectively over. No accounting or consulting firm would hire someone with federal fraud convictions, and his former partners were treating him as a liability to be eliminated rather than a colleague to be supported. But the week's most profound validation came from an unexpected source. The Meridian Industries presentation that Marcus had planned to use as cover for his surprise attack had resulted in the largest corporate wellness contract in Serenity Wellness Center's history. Dr. Reeves, after reviewing your presentation and investigating your company's reputation, Meridian Industries would like to expand our initial proposal, Jennifer Walsh explained during our Friday afternoon meeting. We're recommending Serenity Wellness Center as the preferred provider for all our subsidiary companies across 3 states. The 3-year contract Marcus had planned to claim credit for stealing had evolved into a 5-year, multi-state partnership worth over $4 million. His attempts to sabotage my business relationships had backfired so completely that corporate clients were actually increasing their commitments to demonstrate support for my professionalism and integrity. Friday evening's final development was reported by Rebecca Torres, whose investigation had uncovered the last pieces of Marcus's criminal network. Dr. Reeves, Henderson Investigative Services has been shut down by the state licensing board. Turns out they were conducting illegal surveillance activities for multiple clients, not just your husband. The private investigation firm Marcus had hired was facing criminal charges of their own for conducting unauthorized surveillance, violating privacy laws, and participating in criminal conspiracies. Marcus's network of criminal collaborators was being systematically dismantled by law enforcement agencies. As I reviewed the week's developments from my office at Serenity Wellness Center, surrounded by the meditation cushions and wellness equipment that represented years of honest work and genuine care for others, I felt a profound sense of justice that went beyond personal vindication. Marcus had attempted to destroy everything meaningful in my life through systematic criminal behavior. Instead, his overconfidence and fundamental misunderstanding of my capabilities had led to his complete professional, financial, and legal destruction, while my business emerged stronger and more successful than ever. The man who'd planned to steal my life's work was facing federal prison time, complete financial ruin, and permanent professional exile. The woman he'd dismissed as too spiritual and harmony-focused to fight strategically had just demonstrated that justice, when properly implemented, could be more devastating than any revenge. 18 months later, I stood in the grand opening ceremony of Serenity Wellness Center's second location in downtown Metropolitan Heights, watching Mayor Catherine Williams cut the ceremonial ribbon while local news cameras captured the moment that represented the most extraordinary period of growth in my professional life. The transformation had been nothing short of remarkable. What Marcus had intended to destroy through criminal deception had instead evolved into a wellness empire that now served clients across 4 states. The 25,000-square-foot Metropolitan Heights facility featured cutting-edge recovery technology, therapeutic pools, meditation gardens, and specialized programs for corporate executives, trauma survivors, and professional athletes. Dr. Reeves, this expansion represents exactly the kind of innovative business leadership our community needs, Mayor Williams announced to the gathered crowd of business leaders, clients, and wellness professionals. Serenity Wellness Center has become a model for how passion, integrity, and strategic thinking can create something truly transformative. The irony was profound. Marcus had once suggested I wasn't capable of Fortune 500 material success. Now, my client roster included executives from 12 Fortune 500 companies, 3 professional sports teams, and 2 major universities. The little yoga business he'd dismissed had become the region's premier wellness destination, generating annual revenue that exceeded his former consulting firm's entire client portfolio. The past year had brought opportunities I could never have imagined during those dark days when I first discovered Marcus's betrayal. Harvard Business School had invited me to guest lecture on crisis management and business resilience. The International Wellness Association had awarded me their Entrepreneur of the Year recognition. 3 major publishers were competing to publish my book about building sustainable business practices in the wellness industry. But perhaps most satisfying was the consulting practice I'd developed specifically for business owners facing similar threats. Strategic asset protection had become a specialized service helping entrepreneurs, particularly women, safeguard their businesses against potential fraud, manipulation, and theft by partners, spouses, or business associates. The key lesson isn't about divorce or betrayal, I explained to a women's business conference in Chicago last month. It's about recognizing that thorough preparation and strategic thinking aren't paranoia. They're professional responsibility. Someone capable of building something valuable should also be capable of protecting it. That protection mindset had transformed not just my business practices, but my entire approach to professional relationships. Every contract now included comprehensive fraud protection clauses. Every business partnership required detailed documentation of contributions and responsibilities. Every financial decision was backed by forensic-level record-keeping that would satisfy the most aggressive legal scrutiny. Marcus's criminal case had concluded 6 months ago with a plea agreement that reflected the overwhelming evidence of his systematic fraud. 3 years in federal prison, 5 years of supervised probation, complete financial restitution, and permanent prohibition from any involvement in financial services or business consulting. The man who'd planned to steal my business was now prohibited by federal law from managing anyone else's finances. His professional destruction had been equally comprehensive. McKenzie and Associates had not only terminated his partnership, but successfully sued him for damages related to reputational harm and client relationship disruption. Thompson and Associates had lost their practicing licenses permanently and faced ongoing civil litigation from multiple former clients who'd discovered similar patterns of unethical conduct. The most revealing aspect of Marcus's downfall had been how quickly his support network abandoned him once his criminal behavior became public. Former colleagues who'd praised his strategic thinking suddenly distanced themselves from association with fraud convictions. Professional organizations removed him from membership roles. Even his family had eventually acknowledged that his actions were indefensible. Sarah Chen, who now managed our corporate wellness programs across all locations, had recently shared a perspective that crystallized the broader meaning of our victory. Dr. Reeves, what you accomplished wasn't just protecting your business. You showed that people who try to destroy others through deception and manipulation face real consequences. That matters beyond just your personal situation. She was right. The precedent established by Marcus's prosecution had been cited in several other financial fraud cases where business owners fought back against attempted theft by partners or spouses. The comprehensive documentation standards I'd implemented were being adopted by business schools as best practices for asset protection and fraud prevention. The community impact had been equally profound. Serenity Wellness Center's expansion had created over 60 new jobs in skilled wellness services. Our trauma recovery programs had helped hundreds of veterans, abuse survivors, and first responders heal from psychological injuries that traditional medical approaches had failed to address. The corporate wellness initiatives had reduced stress-related healthcare costs for participating companies by an average of 34%. Jennifer Walsh, whose company had been the catalyst for our massive expansion, had become both a close friend and a powerful advocate for our approach to business development. Sophia, what impressed me most wasn't just your ability to defend against Marcus's attacks, she'd reflected during our quarterly review last week. It was how you transformed that crisis into an opportunity to build something even more meaningful. That transformation mindset had become central to my personal philosophy and business strategy. Every challenge was approached as an opportunity to demonstrate resilience and strategic thinking. Every setback was analyzed for lessons that could strengthen future operations. Every success was leveraged to create additional value for clients and community. The financial outcomes had exceeded even Victoria Sterling's optimistic projections. The restitution payments from Marcus, combined with the expansion contracts and consulting fees, had established a level of financial security that made future attempts at economic manipulation impossible. More importantly, the business structure we developed was so well protected and thoroughly documented that it would be virtually immune to any future legal challenges. But the most profound change was personal rather than professional. The woman who discovered her husband's betrayal while organizing inventory in her stockroom had evolved into someone who understood that strategic thinking and compassionate service weren't contradictory. They were complementary forces that created sustainable success. Marcus had taught me, albeit unintentionally, that kindness without strategic intelligence was vulnerability, but that strategic intelligence without genuine care for others was ultimately self-destructive. The balance between those forces had become the foundation of everything I'd built since his attempted destruction. As I locked the doors of the new Metropolitan Heights location and prepared for the drive back to Riverside Heights, I reflected on the extraordinary journey from victimization to vindication to transformation. Marcus's criminal conspiracy had been designed to steal my business and destroy my professional reputation. Instead, it had forced me to discover capabilities I'd never fully appreciated and to build protections that had enabled unprecedented growth. The final irony was that Marcus had actually done me an enormous favor, though certainly not in the way he'd intended. His betrayal had eliminated a relationship that was holding me back while teaching me lessons about strategic thinking and self-protection that had made every subsequent success possible. The woman he'd planned to surprise and overpower had become someone capable of building wellness empires, influencing industry standards, and helping other entrepreneurs protect themselves against similar threats. His intended victim had become a leader whose success story would inspire others for years to come. Justice, it turned out, wasn't just about punishment, it was about transformation. And the transformation Marcus's criminal behavior had accidentally triggered had been more profound and more rewarding than any revenge could possibly have been. Coming up next, you'll see 2 more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a